Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles, a social gathering at first light with clothes and drinks. David weaved his way through the crowd in a well-tailored suit, a decent smile on his face as he exchanged pleasantries with his guests. He is a well-known architect in the city with a successful career and a happy family, and is the envy of all. However, at this moment, his heart was as dull and depressing as if it was being pressed by a huge stone. Just a few minutes earlier, a uniformed courier had found him in the crowd and handed him a craft envelope without any sender information. David took it suspiciously, went to a relatively quiet corner, and opened the envelope. There was only one photo inside, a 6-inch sized color photo, but it was like a bomb that instantly blew his peaceful life to smithereens. In the background of the photo is an azure beach, the golden sand shimmering brightly in the sunlight, and in the distance are a few white sailboats dotting the turquoise sea. In the center of the image are two figures snuggled together. One is his wife, Emma, the other, a strange man. Emma was wearing a long, flowing red dress, her hair blowing gently in the sea breeze, and she had a huge smile on her face, a smile that David hadn't seen on her face for a long time. One of her hands was intimately wrapped around the arm of the man beside her, while the other held up a brightly colored cocktail that she appeared to be clinking with him. David had never met the man, but from the photo, he was tall and dark, with deep features and a touch of exoticism. He was wearing a white casual shirt with the collar button casually unbuttoned a few times, revealing a firm chest. He was looking down at Emma, his eyes full of love and doting, the corners of his mouth slightly upturned, sketching out a charming smile. The closeness and understanding between the two is clearly felt through the photos. It was as if they were in a world that belonged only to them, and everything around them had nothing to do with them. And this is a world that David will never be able to shrew. David just felt a rush of blood to his head, and his fingers holding the photo turned pale from the effort, his knuckles clacking. His mind went blank, his ears buzzed. The laughter around him seemed to have left him, and the whole world became unreal. He couldn't believe his eyes, couldn't believe that the woman in the photo was his wife of 10 years, the once gentle and understanding Emma. Anger, shock, doubt, pain, all sorts of emotions came in like a tidal wave and overwhelmed David. He felt like he'd been hit in the chest with a punch and couldn't catch his breath. His heart, as if clutched hard by a large invisible hand, hurt so much that he almost choked. He struggled to calm himself, forcing himself to calm down. He scrutinized the photo, trying to pick out some clues. The background of the photo, a typical South Asian beach scene, matched where Emma had told him she was going a few weeks ago. But who was this man? When did he and Emma meet? What is the relationship between them? A myriad of questions swirled around David's head like a swarm of headless flies, giving him a splitting headache. He suddenly remembers that the photo didn't come without warning, and that Emma's erratic behavior had set the stage for this betrayal weeks before. Thoughts go back to a night a few weeks ago. David returns home from a long day's work only to find that Emma is not in the kitchen preparing dinner as usual. She sat on the couch in the living room, a travel magazine in her hand, flipping through it absent-mindedly. "What's the matter with you?" It looks preoccupied. David walked over and sat down next to her, concerned. Emma looked up at him with a hint of exhaustion and weariness in her eyes. "I'm fine, just feeling a little tired," she said gently. "Working too hard?" David asked tentatively. "Maybe," Emma replied perfunctorily. "I've been thinking lately, isn't it about time we made a lifestyle change?" "Lifestyle change?" David was a little confused. "What do you mean?" "It's getting out and about and seeing what's out there." Emma's eyes drifted out the window as if she was running away from something. "I've been feeling like our life is a pool of stagnant water lately. There's no ripples, and repeating the same thing over and over again every day is just suffocating." David was silent for a moment. He could understand how Emma felt. They have been married for 10 years, and their life has long since returned to the mundane, and the passion and romance of the beginning has long since been replaced by the trivialities of the wood, rice, oil, and salt. He himself was occasionally bored, but he never wanted to change anything because he felt that this uneventful and stable life was what happiness looked like. "Where do you want to go?" David asked. South Asia. Without hesitation, Emma replied, I'd like to visit there to get a feel for the different culture and maybe find some inspiration. Emma is a freelance illustrator who works as a commercial illustrator to support her family. But we have children to take care of. David hesitated. The kids can be left in the care of mom and dad for a few days. They're always happy to help. Emma cut him off. Besides, I'm only going for a while. I'll be back soon. David looked into Emma's determined eyes and finally nodded. All right, you can go if you want. But be safe, and call me anytime if anything happens. I know. Emma smiled, an imperceptible twinkle in her eye. And so it was that Emma embarked on her journey to South Asia a week later. She told David that it was a solo trip to relax and find inspiration. David, though a bit reluctant, could only respect her choice. However, things gradually went beyond David's expectations. In the time Emma has been away, David has noticed some strange signs. He accidentally sees Emma's credit card statement and realizes that it has some unspecified purchases on it, all in South Asia. He tries to contact Emma, but her phone is often switched off, and even when he occasionally gets through, her tone is always perfunctory, as if she is hiding something from him. To add to David's unease, he also finds some strange emails on Emma's computer. The emails were written in English and addressed to a man named Victor. The content of the email is ambiguous and reveals an unusual intimacy between the lines. David's mind was filled with doubt and anxiety. He's beginning to suspect that Emma's trip isn't as simple as she makes it out to be. He begins to suspect that the man named Victor is the one who is seen in the photographs in an intimate embrace with Emma. It wasn't until Emma returned from South Asia that David finally snapped. What's going on? David slammed the picture down in front of Emma and asked in a shaky voice, Who is this man? Why did you lie to me? Emma looked at the picture, and her face instantly turned pale. She opened her mouth as if to explain something, but ultimately chose to remain silent. Say something. David snarled. You're telling me this is all a lie, aren't you? Emma took a deep breath and looked up at David with mixed emotions in her eyes. I'm sorry, David, she said softly. I don't know how to explain this to you. You don't know how to explain it? David said, You're kissing another man on the beach, and you're telling me you don't know how to explain it? Tears came to Emma's eyes as she choked back a sob. I'll admit, there were some feelings between Victor and I, but I never wanted to betray you or this family. Feelings? David's voice became unusually cold. You talk to me about feelings? Do you think you are still qualified to talk to me about feelings? I know I was wrong, but I'm begging you, give me another chance, okay? Emma cried. Is our marriage really just so stifling to you? Just because it's so bland? Too bland? Is that why you betrayed me? David's heart was in his throat. Emma, I thought there was at least some trust and respect between us, but it seems I was wrong, dead wrong. I didn't mean to. I just got carried away in the heat of the moment. Emma argued, I promise never again. I'll cut off all contact with him and we'll start over, okay? David looked at the tearful woman in front of him with a mixture of disappointment and pain. He used to think that the love between him and Emma was unbreakable, but now it seems like it was all just his fantasy. Start over? David laughed bitterly. Do you think we can start over? Do you think I can trust you again? Emma fell silent, knowing that she had completely lost David's trust. I'm tired, Emma, David said wearily. I don't want to argue with you anymore. Let's get a divorce. No, David, I can't live without you. I can't live without this family. Emma cried out in horror, but David had already turned and walked into the bedroom, slamming the door heavily behind him. That night, David sat alone in front of his bedroom window, looking out at the dark night sky, with mixed feelings. He used to think that his life would always go on like this in peace and happiness, but now it seemed that everything was just a beautiful bubble that would burst at the touch of a button. The seeds of revenge, at this moment, were quietly planted. David told himself. He couldn't just let it go. He was going to make those who hurt him pay. He's no longer the weak victim, and he's going to make Emma and that Victor pay for their behavior. He wanted them to know that betrayal, there was a price to pay. The thought of divorce hangs like a dark cloud over David's mind, but the flames of vengeance burn hotter and hotter in his heart, temporarily overshadowing the darkness of divorce. He knows that now is not the time to end the marriage. He needs Emma. He needs her as a pawn in his revenge plan. He was going to make her experience the bitter consequences of betrayal firsthand, and he was going to make her pay dearly for her behavior. And, of course, there's that Victor, the one responsible for destroying his family, who David won't take lightly. Over the next few days, David maintains his normal life on the surface, and his relationship with Emma seems to have returned to normal. Like a patient hunter, he waited quietly for the perfect moment. He knew that revenge couldn't be rushed. It needed to be carefully planned, step by step. One weekend morning, David went alone to his study, turned on his computer, and began his plan for revenge. His first thought was to capitalize on his almost forgotten relationship with Victor as a college alumnus. David and Victor went to the same university, but they were not in the same department and had very few encounters. David's impression of Victor is still that of the bossy, uncaring rich kid from his college days. Victor was the man of the hour at school, from a good family, with excellent grades and surrounded by a crowd of admirers. David, on the other hand, is just an ordinary student, studying and living in obscurity, with no interaction with Victor. However, David clearly remembers that once, in the school cafeteria, he witnessed Victor getting into an argument and eventually a fight over a minor issue. David was impressed by Victor's arrogance and ruthlessness. Now, this dusty memory becomes a breakthrough in David's revenge program. He thought to himself that Victor's character might still be the same after all these years. And such people, often conceited and greedy, are most easily seduced by profit. David decided to start there. He'll disguise himself as an entrepreneur in need of investment, approach Victor, gain his trust, and then lead him into an elaborate trap. The first step is to investigate Victor's background. David knows that knowing your enemy and knowing yourself is the only way to fight. He has gotten a preliminary idea of Victor's current situation through internet searches and college alumni directories. As expected, Victor joined the family business after graduation and is now the owner of an investment firm and is well known in the industry. To get more detailed information, David decides to hire a private investigator. He posts the assignment on a secretive investigative website, and soon a private investigator named Frank takes on the case. Frank's experience and tactics soon brought David details of Victor. Victor's investment company, Victor Capital, has grown rapidly in recent years, investing in a number of high-tech and internet projects. Victor himself lives a life of luxury, owning several properties, including a luxury villa in the suburbs. Frank also highlighted Victor's penchant for risk-taking and high-risk, high-reward projects. With this information, David's plan for revenge becomes clearer. He decides to take advantage of Victor's desire for a high-return project by tailoring a tantalizing investment trap for him. Over the next few weeks, David began to carefully construct his entrepreneur persona. He fictionalized a project called Future Technology and created a beautiful project proposal. This project claims to develop a revolutionary AI technology with a broad market outlook and a very high return on investment. Of course, it's all a lie. The so-called future technology is just an empty shell without any actual technology or products. But David believed that if it was packaged well enough, it would be enough to get Victor hooked. To make the scam even more realistic, David also roped in a few friends to join in the scheme. His friend Mark, a veteran programmer, can take care of the technical side of the package. Friend Emily is an accomplished designer who can be responsible for the visual presentation of a project. My friend Sarah is a savvy financier who can take care of the financial data falsification. With the joint efforts of everyone, the packaging of the future technology project was completed very quickly. They created a professional website, designed beautiful brochures, and even developed a demo version of the software. Everything looks so real and attractive. Now, everything is ready to go. David needed a chance to approach Victor in a natural way. That opportunity came quickly. Through a business associate, David learns that Victor will be attending a high-end business dinner the following week. This dinner is a gathering of the industry's elite and an excellent platform for meeting people and expanding business. David immediately decides that he will attend the dinner and bump into Victor there. On the day of the dinner, David arrived dressed to the nines in a customized suit. As he exchanged pleasantries with his acquaintances, he searched Victor's figure with his afterimage. Finally, in a corner, he saw the familiar and unfamiliar figure. Victor is his usual self, dressed in designer labels, flamboyant in demeanor, surrounded by a group of people who are talking up a storm. David took a deep breath and adjusted himself, then walked toward Victor with a glass of red wine in his hand. "Victor, long time no see." David smiled and offered a greeting. Victor looked up and saw David, staring for a moment, then seemed to remember something, a playful smile on his face. "You're David. It's been a long time. Where are you high up now?" "I started my own little company, a small business," David said modestly. "Oh, doing what?" Victor asked absently, but his eyes looked David up and down as if assessing his worth. "Primarily, we do AI technology development," David said with deliberate understatement, and then the words changed. "By the way, I recently heard that you've been doing well in the investment field. That's really something." "Haha, I'm flattered." Victor smiled, obviously flattered. "Do you have any instructions?" "I don't dare to be instructed. It's just that I've recently had a project that I feel is quite promising. I wonder if you'd be interested in learning more about it?" David asked tentatively. "Oh, tell me about it." Victor's eyes flashed with interest. David then gave a succinct introduction to the Future Tech program, highlighting the high return on investment and the broad market prospects for the program. Sure enough, Victor's eyes lit up after listening and asked, "This project of yours, what is the valuation now?" "We're still in the angel round stage with a modest valuation, but the growth potential is huge." David says, "We're confident we can achieve more than tenfold growth within a year, as long as the funding is there." 10 times? There was a hint of skepticism in Victor's tone. "Don't you kid me." "Of course I'm not kidding," David said. "I have a detailed project plan here that you can look at." With that, he took a beautiful plan out of his briefcase and handed it to Victor. Victor took the plans and flipped through them quickly. David noticed that his eyes were becoming more and more focused, and his brow was furrowed slightly as if he was thinking hard about something. "This program, it's kind of interesting." Victor closed the planner and said thoughtfully, "But I need to know more." "Of course, I welcome you to visit our company anytime." David says, "We can also arrange for you to meet with our technical team so they can give you the technical details of the program." "Good, then it's settled." Victor nodded. "I'll schedule a time to visit your office." The two chatted some more and then exchanged business cards. David knew that Victor had taken the bait. As he left the dinner, an imperceptible smile appeared at the corner of David's mouth. He knew that a crucial step had been taken in his plan for revenge. Over the next few days, David and his team continued to refine every detail of the Future Tech project to make it seamless. They even rented an office space in a high-end office building to house the company. It wasn't long before Victor called and said he wanted to visit Future Tech for a site visit. David received him warmly and arranged Mark and Emily to introduce the technical details and market prospect of the project to him. Victor listened attentively and asked questions from time to time and seemed very interested in the program. At the end of the visit, Victor said to David, "I am very optimistic about this project of yours. I will seriously consider investing in it." "Thank you for the recognition," David said. "We look forward to working with you." After sending Victor off, David and his team high-fived. They know that they are one step closer to success. However, just then, Victor suddenly stopped, looked back at David, and said with a wry smile, "David, you don't look like a man of great deeds." David didn't panic in the face of Victor's skepticism. He smiled slightly and replied calmly, "Is that so? Perhaps you don't know me well enough, Victor. But I'm sure time will tell." In his eyes, there was a glint of confidence and determination, as if to tell Victor that the game had only just begun. And he, David, will be the ultimate winner. Victor's remark, "You don't look like a man who can do great things," was like a thorn in David's heart. But he knew that it was not the right time to break up with Victor. His plan for revenge has just begun, and he needs Victor to fall deeper into this trap before he can strike a fatal blow. On the other hand, Emma's life has been turned upside down. Since that photo was discovered by David, her relationship with Victor has gone from underground to above ground. Victor no longer hides his infatuation with Emma and begins to take her to public events and introduce her to his business partners. Emma is so immersed in the romance and passion created by Victor that her guilt over David and her attachment to her marriage gradually fall by the wayside. She enjoys the luxurious life brought by Victor, reveling in the envy and praise of those around her, as if she had become a high and mighty queen. Victor introduces Emma as his personal advisor and involves her in the company's business. Emma knows nothing about business, but Victor has given her the responsibility of managing the finances of some projects. In fact, it's part of David's revenge program. He intentionally asked Victor to place Emma in a finance-related position in order to get her deeply involved in the bogus investment program and to lay the groundwork for subsequent legal recourse. Emma is oblivious to this and takes it as a sign of Victor's trust and regard for her. She started to learn about finances and tried to play the role of a personal advisor without realizing that she was heading into an abyss. Victor's interest in the future of technology project grew as the project progressed. He began meeting with David frequently to discuss the details of the investment. David continues to play the role of the passionate and dreamy entrepreneur, keeping Victor firmly in his hands. To further confuse Victor, David arranges a project roadshow. He invited a number of potential investors, including his friends and some real investors, to the roadshow. At the roadshow, David presented the technical advantages and market prospects of the future tech project and showed a demo version of the developed software. Everything is going very well, and Victor's confidence in the program is growing. He even started to help David publicize the project and get more investors on board. Emma, Victor's personal advisor, was also involved in the roadshow. She sat next to Victor and watched David speak eloquently on stage, her heart filled with mixed emotions. On the one hand, she was happy for David's success. On the other hand, she felt vaguely uneasy that the program seemed too good to be true. However, this unease is soon drowned out by Victor's sweet talk and the bragging rights of those around him. She continues to indulge in the dream Victor has woven for her, oblivious to the impending crisis. Over time, Victor decided to formally invest in the future tech program. He signed an investment agreement with David and injected a large sum of money into the account of future tech. With the investment in hand, David's revenge program has entered a new phase. He began to spread some underhanded gossip about Victor and Emma's relationship. The news quickly spread through the industry, causing talk and criticism of Emma from those around her. Some say Emma got to the top by selling her sex. Some say she's a canary raised by Victor, and others say she doesn't know anything about business and is just a vase. The gossip is like a sharp knife that stabs Emma's pride. She began to feel stressed, tired, and confused. She didn't understand why she had to suffer so much criticism and accusations when she had only pursued a genuine relationship. Even more disturbing to Emma is the subtle change in Victor's attitude towards her. He started to become cold to her, stopped being submissive to her like he used to be, and even started to lose his temper with her. One time, Victor was furious with Emma for a mistake on a project. "What's wrong with you? You can't even do such a simple thing, right?" Victor roared. "Do you not know anything about finance at all? I was so blind to put you in charge of such an important job." Emma was cursed and tears welled up in her eyes. She wanted to explain, to defend herself, but there was nothing to say. Because she really doesn't know anything about finances, all she does is follow David's instructions mechanically. I. Emma choked back a sob, not knowing what to say. "You what you?" Victor rudely interrupted her. "What do you think you are? You're nothing but a woman who got to the top by relying on a man. Without me, you are nothing." Victor's words were like a sharp knife, piercing Emma's heart. She finally realizes that she has no place at all in Victor's heart. All he loved was her youth and beauty, just the freshness and excitement she brought him. Once they were gone, she would be unceremoniously abandoned by him. Emma begins to wonder if Victor really cares about her, and she even wonders if the relationship is really worth giving up everything for. She thought of David, of the happy times they had had, of the warmth of that home. She began to regret her impulsiveness and capriciousness, regretting that she had hurt the man who loved her most. However, it was too late. She was too deep in the muck to pull herself out. In order to maintain this precarious relationship, Emma has to continue to ingratiate herself with Victor and help him with his future technology project. She even started using her connections to help Victor bring in more investors. Against her own moral compass, she recommended the program to her close friends and family, claiming it was a once-in-a-lifetime investment opportunity. She vowed that the program would make them a fortune. After Emma's persuasion, a number of people became motivated, and they took out their savings and invested in the program. They trust Emma. They trust her not to lie to them. However, unbeknownst to them, it was all a huge scam. The money they invested has long since been transferred by David to a secret account and has become the spoils of his revenge program. Emma knows nothing of this and continues to play Victor's right-hand woman in this phony venture. Little did she know that she was personally pushing herself and those around her into an abyss of doom. As more and more money flowed into the future technology program, the scam snowballed. David knew it was time to close the net. He couldn't wait to see Victor and Emma's desperate faces, to see them pay dearly for their behavior. However, just as David is about to take the final step in his plan, he is suddenly approached by Emma. "David, I beg you, leave us alone." Emma cried, "I know I was wrong. I shouldn't have betrayed you. I shouldn't have hurt you. But all of this is my fault. It has nothing to do with Victor. Whatever grudge you have, take it out on me. Please don't hurt him anymore." David looked at the haggard woman in front of him without a trace of pity in his heart. He said coldly, "Spare you? Do you think it's possible? You guys ruined my life and my family. Do you think I'll let you guys off easily? I know. We deserve it." Emma said, "But Victor, he's innocent. He's just been dragged into this by me. Please, for the sake of our marriage, let him go." "Innocent?" David commented. "He destroyed my family, took my wife, and you're telling me he's innocent? Emma, aren't you being naive?" "I." Emma's tongue was hanging back and she knew that David was right. Victor was not innocent. "You go, Emma." David said, "Don't come back to me. I've already given you a chance. You're the one who didn't appreciate it. Now, it's too late." Emma left in despair. She knew that David would never let Victor go, or her for that matter. She's at the end of her rope and can only watch herself and Victor go down the tubes together. David, on the other hand, continues to move forward with his plan of revenge. The final showdown, he knew, was coming. He wants Victor and Emma to pay the ultimate price for their betrayal. Emma's pleading doesn't shake David, but rather strengthens his resolve for revenge. He would make these two people who betrayed him taste 100 or 1,000 times more pain than he did. And now the time is ripe. David chose to expose this shocking scam at a major shareholders' meeting held at Victor. On this day, Victor stood on the stage with great vigor, describing to hundreds of investors the bright prospects of the future technology project and promising high returns. Emma sits in the front row with a proud and charming smile on her face, as if she is part of this success. While Victor was giving his impassioned speech, David suddenly appeared at the meeting. He walks right up to the stage and grabs the microphone out of Victor's hand. "Guys, I'm sorry to interrupt." David's voice carried through the microphone. "I want to show you all something." The venue was in an uproar, and everyone looked at the uninvited guests suspiciously. Victor's face instantly turns blue as he recognizes David, his former love rival, the husband he betrayed in marriage. "David, what do you want?" Victor roared, "Security. Where's security? Get him out of here." However, no one paid any attention to Victor's shouts, because what David showed next grabbed everyone's attention. David inserted a USB flash drive into the projector's port, and a detailed document immediately appeared on the big screen. "These are the true financial statements for the future tech program," David said coldly. "As you can see, there is no real income at all from this program, and all the money has been transferred to a private account." The venue exploded with investors mingling and talking. They couldn't believe that this program, touted by Victor, was an outright scam. "This can't be. This must be a fake." Victor shouted hysterically, "This is slander. It's slander. Slander? Slander?" David gave a laugh. "So, how do you explain this one?" David switches to another slide, showing the email logs of Emma's involvement in the financial operations of the project. Emma, your wife, Victor's personal advisor. She's the treasurer of the program. David said mockingly, these emails, clear as day, document how she assisted you in transferring funds. Emma's face instantly turned pale, and she slumped in her chair, trembling. She knew that it was all over. And these. David continued to show evidence, including Victor's forged contracts, false patent certificates, and chat logs between him and team members, among other things. Each piece of evidence, like a heavy hammer, hit Victor and Emma hard and sent them into the abyss of doom. You devil. Victor glares at David with hatred and fear in his eyes. The devil? I'm just taking back everything that's mine, David said. Do you think you can fool everyone? You think you can get away with it? You're wrong, Victor. You're dead wrong. The venue was already in chaos as angry investors rushed the stage and surrounded Victor and Emma. They demanded that Victor compensate them for their losses, and some even began to push and shove. Call the police. Call the police. Victor cried out in horror. However, no one was listening to him anymore. Those bodyguards of his had long since been dispersed by the angry crowd. Those followers he once had also left him at the moment, fearing that they would be dragged down by him. Just then, the police arrived on the scene and took Victor and Emma away. They will face the law and pay dearly for their fraudulent behavior. David, on the other hand, stood quietly, watching it all. There was no expression on his face, neither the thrill of revenge nor the relief of relief. It was a revenge that he had planned for a long time and had given a lot. He exploits Victor's greed, he exploits Emma's betrayal, and he weaves an elaborate trap into which he leads them step by step. He had succeeded, and he had given these two people who had hurt him the punishment they deserved. However, he felt an emptiness inside. He thought revenge would make him happy, but in reality, he wasn't as happy as he thought he would be. Because this revenge not only destroys Victor and Emma, but also himself. He lost his family, his marriage, everything he once had. He became a man he hated and full of himself. His life, as a result, is full of holes. A few days later, David appeared at the trial as a witness. In court, he gave a detailed account of Victor's fraudulent behavior and Emma's role in it. Victor tries to defend himself, but his defense pales in the face of the hard evidence David provides. He initially tried to fight back against David legally, through a team of lawyers, claiming that David was the one behind it and that he was just set up by David. But David had already prepared all the evidence through his team of friends, including how he found out that Emma was cheating on him, how he started investigating Victor, how he devised this revenge plan, and so on. Every step of Victor's struggle falls under David's control. Emma, for her part, remained silent, not defending herself or accusing anyone. She just sat there quietly, like a puppet that had lost its soul. Ultimately, the court sentenced Victor to 10 years in prison and a fine for fraud. His company was also forced into bankruptcy and liquidation to compensate investors for their losses. His reputation was completely swept away, and everything he once had was in ruins. Emma was sentenced to 3 years imprisonment, suspended, for involvement in fraud. She was blamed by public opinion and investors, abandoned by her former friends and family, and suffered a complete mental breakdown. She lost Victor's support, her financial resources, and her hope for life. After sentencing, David walked out of the courtroom. He glanced back at the woman who had once haunted him, now so haggard and downtrodden. There was not a trace of sympathy in his heart, only endless indifference. "This is but the price you owe me." David mumbled something, then turned away. He knew that this revenge was over, but his life, however, was not. He needs to start over. He needs to find a new direction. He needs to make choices for his future, for himself. And Victor, as he was being escorted to the prison van, suddenly turned his head and shouted to David, "You think you've won? You didn't. You've ruined me, and you've ruined yourself. You'll never be truly happy." David didn't look back. He knew Victor was right. It's a revenge, a lose-lose war where no one is a real winner. But he has no regrets, because it's the only thing he can do, and it's what he has to do. In prison, Victor began his long sentence. He spends his days in remorse and pain, hating David and hating himself even more. He hated his own greed, his own stupidity, and why he had ended up where he was. One day he received a letter from David. He opened the envelope and there was only a piece of paper inside, and the only words on the paper were, "Enjoy the retribution that belongs to you." Victor tore the letterhead to shreds as he growled and cursed angrily, but to no avail. He knew that he would live in this nightmare forever and never be free of it. And Emma, after all this, is completely devastated. She couldn't handle the publicity, couldn't face her mistakes, and couldn't forgive herself for her stupidity. She became insane and delirious and was eventually institutionalized. She lives in a world of her own every day, with David and Victor's names on her lips. She cried one moment, laughed the next, talked to herself the next, and was silent the next. She has completely lost herself and her hope for life. It's a revenge that ends in tragedy in the lives of three people. It swept through the lives of the three men like a devastating storm, destroying everything they had ever had. And David, too, has begun a new life of his own. He knew it would take him a long time to move on from this revenge. He needs to rediscover himself, rediscover the meaning of life, and rediscover the ability to love and be loved. The dust settles, and all the noise falls silent. David stands in the empty office of Future Tech, the company he once set up for revenge, now empty and in disarray. As he looked around, the signs that had once symbolized hopes and dreams, the fake product models created to deceive Victor, now seemed like mocking jokes, reminding him of the absurdity and cruelty of this revenge. Did he win? Maybe. He succeeds in making Victor and Emma pay, but he has scarred himself. This vengeance, like a double-edged sword, stabbed his enemy as deeply as he stabbed himself. Over the next few days, David follows through on his plan to officially end his marriage to Emma. He hired the best lawyers and fought for custody of his son. His son became his only solace in this storm and his hope for a future life. He decides to leave the city of painful memories and move with his son to a distant seaside town to start life anew. He sold his original house and with the remaining money bought a cottage on the beach and lived a simple and peaceful life. Every morning, he sends his son to school and then goes to the beach alone, watching the tide rise and fall and contemplating the meaning of life. He began to learn to surf, releasing his inner repression and pain as he battled the waves. He has also begun to try his hand at writing, taking his experiences and insights and putting them into a story that he hopes will lead to redemption. And Emma, after leaving the asylum, disappeared completely. Some say she went back to her hometown and lived incognito in a remote town. Others say she changed her name, went abroad and never came back. Either way, she paid a terrible price for her betrayal. She lost her marriage, her family, her friends, her dignity, and her hope for life. Like a ghost, she wanders the edges of this world, never able to escape the shadows of her past. As for Victor, he spent 10 long years in prison. In those 10 years, he went from being a spirited entrepreneur to a gray-haired prisoner. He suffers daily from remorse and pain, and he misses the freedom and glory he once had, as well as those he deceived and hurt. After his release from prison, Victor tries to make a fresh start, but he realizes that the world has abandoned him. No one was willing to give him a chance. No one was willing to believe him, and even his family shunned him. He's left to spend the rest of his life alone in a rundown apartment. By chance, Victor receives a letter from David. The letter had no stamps, no address, and simply read, "Enjoy your new life where you belong. I'm sending you one last gift. I hope you like it." Victor shakily opens the envelope, which contains a newspaper clipping of a story about Emma. A woman named Emma, who is mentally disturbed, living on the streets, and ends up in a rescue shelter. Tears came to Victor's eyes as he clutched the clipping to his chest and bawled like a child. He knew that this was David's last and cruelest punishment for him. Years later, David became a well-known author, and his works are full of thoughts on human nature and insights on life, which are loved by readers. He takes his son to various book signings to share with readers his creative writing and also his understanding of life. Once, he was interviewed by a media outlet, and the reporter asked him, "Your works are filled with depictions of betrayal and revenge. May I ask if these were inspired by your own experiences? David was silent for a moment, then said, Yes, I once went through a very painful period in which I was betrayed by those closest to me, and I also took revenge in extreme ways. This experience made me deeply realize the complexity and fragility of human nature, and also made me understand the importance of loyalty and trust. Loyalty is the most basic bond between people, and once this bond is broken, it will cause irreparable harm. Trust, on the other hand, is built on the foundation of loyalty and is the most valuable asset between people, and once it is lost, it is very difficult to rebuild. The reporter then asked, So, how do you feel about the cost of betrayal? David said, The price of betrayal is heavy, both for the betrayer and the betrayed. The betrayer will lose the trust of others, will be condemned by his conscience, and will pay a terrible price. The betrayed, on the other hand, will suffer great pain and may even take the path of revenge. However, revenge does not solve the problem, but rather brings more harm. True redemption comes from forgiveness and letting go. After the interview, David took his son back to his home on the beach. He stood in front of the window, looking at the sun that was rising in the distance, his heart filled with hope and longing. Dad, what are you thinking? His son asked, tugging at the corner of his coat. David smiled, picked up his son, and said, I was thinking that our lives are just beginning, and that we need to savor every day, enjoy every moment, and live our lives to the fullest. He murmured, as if to himself and as if to everyone else, betrayal may change a person, but it never destroys a sober person. We must learn to draw strength from our pain, learn to forgive and let go, and learn to cherish what is in front of us. Only then can we truly step out of the shadows and embrace the sunshine and the future. The sun was warm and bright on his face. He knew that he had found a new direction for his life and would set sail again. He's taking his son and sailing into a brighter future together. He wants to use his own experience to tell more people. Loyalty is the most valuable treasure in life. Trust is the most beautiful bridge between people. And forgiveness is the medicine that heals all wounds. This, then, is his final revenge and his final redemption. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.